altitude. Please put your body, mind, and soul in the upright position. We hope you enjoy the ride.
Welcome to WAYSPACE. This is it. Here we are. Let's be here now. How are you doing? It feels good to be back in a solo cast podcast situation here, talking to you straight into your ears, or however you're listening to it. It feels good. It feels like I'm getting back to sort of doing this longer form thing. I mean, last week I did a short one, which was kind of nice as an experience, actually. And listening to it back, I realized even though it was short, it didn't glaze over stuff. It had something to it. I was just also feeling like I didn't have the energy reserves to talk for a long period of time, I guess. But this week I can feel that I do. It's almost 1 a.m., I guess technically Monday morning. And it feels nice to I had some tea. I'm up later than usual at this point, and it kind of feels good. It feels special, and yeah, and I'm just excited to talk on this podcast, and share what's going on with me and experience what's going on with me, and hopefully in some way see what you think. Well, you'll see what you think and you'll let me know what you think, but I'm calling this episode Let's Get Learnt. And it's a little bit silly, but it's also I think it's something important that I really want to talk about, which is the learning process and what it's like to learn and what it feels like to be in a state of learning and to open yourself in that kind of way. Right now, I'm currently looking at a jar of mushrooms that I learned how to grow within the last few months, and the process was kind of challenging. And I won't say what kind of mushrooms these are. These are totally chill mushrooms that I grew that are totally fine to be talking about. Just want to make that clear. And I basically, I'm going to learn how to do this. I want to do something new and challenge myself. And it was a little bit challenging, but at the same time, I felt like I was just yearning for something, to learn something, And so here I am with this jar of some of these that I grew, but I ended up with so much mold in the process. And so what was supposed to be probably I would say probably, I don't know, 30 times as much as I got about a 30th of that. And it was interesting. It was a really wonderful learning process to learn kind of what could go wrong, sort of, and how I would change things up next time. But I feel like I'm really grateful for this process and for learning what I'm learning. And it just feels like, I have these in front of me because I just felt like this is a helpful sort of symbol for kind of where I want to come at this podcast from, basically, what perspective I want to come at it with, which is this feeling like there's challenge in the learning process, but there's also everything else. It's so expansive and so open and so really just awakening in every way. And basically, the reason I'm thinking about this is in my morning pages the other day, I had a moment where I was basically appreciating that, oh, right, like I I remember now when I started thinking about, okay, I'm going to learn how to set up my live stream. I'm going to get a whole new setup with a new custom computer and like all these things set up, and I'm going to learn about all this stuff. And that was like in the fall of 2020. And I remember kind of getting to this point where I was like, oh, streaming was what allowed me, like doing my Twitch stream was what allowed me to feel so much better. And what I realized was, yes, doing the Twitch stream is a wonderful thing and amazing, but at the same time, it's not so much specifically the streaming that gave me this profound, wonderful sense of fulfillment. In many ways, the activity is fulfilling, but what is underneath that was an openness and a willingness I found myself in. I found myself in an open, tender, willing state. And that state, which I would say is the state of learning, of being a student, is what I feel like. That's what I feel like is so valuable. That's what I've been thinking about. And I'm learning a lot. I'm even in this very podcast in talking about like my, learning process growing, the fungi, I was like, wait, do I want to say all that? And then I was thinking, wait, no, it's fine. It's totally good. It's totally good. And I feel like that's where I'm at. I'm kind of letting myself, learn, which means being willing to maybe fail isn't necessarily the word, but just like mess up or make a mistake or doubt myself or second guess or whatever, like allow that to happen, because I know that ultimately I don't have to do that and I can just continue learning. So the past week I've been thinking a lot about that and about what can I do now in my life to set myself up to be a student, to learn, to really experience the tender, supple humility that comes with being a person that is learning. And goddamn, I'm just feeling like that's where I want to be right now, and that's what I want to do. And I definitely, encourage you in general, but as you're listening to this, to think about where it is in your life that you feel like there are opportunities for you to learn something new. I mean, you could learn from your experiences that you have, but I in particular mean like learning something new, like learning a new skill, learning an instrument, learning a new habit, learning a new discipline, learning how to cook something, learning how to grow something, learning how to so many different things. It could be anything. It's just about this setting ourselves up into this humble place where we experience beginner's mind, where we experience that kind of humility. That for me feels so incredibly valuable right now, in a kind of way where it's scary, and that's how I know that I'm like in the right spot. And I can feel it. I mean, right now for me, I'm thinking about this course that basically, I don't want to get into it too much because I feel like it's like I don't need to talk so much about it when I haven't even done much. But it's basically just kind of a more formalized way of me engaging as a student with particular practices in a way that feels very right for me, in terms of it being like very much so self-directed and on my own time. I mean, I feel like I've been doing that throughout my spiritual practice, awakening process, magical practice, whatever you want to call it. It's all kind of this just experience that's been happening to me, or that I've been sort of learning through. And I feel like what's been happening lately, and I was listening to a podcast today where I was exposed to this, and I can tell that it resonated with me, is that I've found myself bouncing between, or oscillating, you could say, between different practices. So I have like some practices that are just, like mindfulness meditation, and then I have some practices that are like, using my imagination to create the reality I want. So constructing scenes and assuming their sort of experiential truth, and then they play out. So there's that. There's like concentration meditation as opposed to mindfulness meditation. There's vipassana meditation. There's like there's just a bunch of stuff that I sort of have gone. I've dipped my toes in, and then I take one more step, and then it starts to get just deep enough. Like if you want to take it into metaphorical terms of like going into waters, just deep enough that I have to start treading water and swim. And I'm like, maybe I'll go and try this one. And so then, say that's, like Vipassana meditation. And I'm doing, I'm getting to the point where I have this experience where I'm like, if I want to meditate this like for an hour every day, then I'm going to have to start. It's going to put me into situations where I'm a little bit uncomfortable. Oh, am I too attached to meditating? I don't know, and then I get into this second guessing situation, and I decide, maybe my meditation will be, doing visualization of these scenes that I want to play out, which then goes to a whole other way of understanding myself as a practitioner. And I become, now it's about, kind of embodying and actualizing my desires, which is very different from like Vipassana meditation. And so it takes me to this other pool, other area, watery area. And so then I dip my toes in and I start taking steps. And then I get to the point where I have to start to tread water, which is like, I would say with sort of imagining, like, that's like, I start to feel like I'm imagining things that are harder for my ego to accept outright. And so it feels like it's bumping up against what I'm willing to believe. And for that practice, it's very important that I learn how to have flexibility with what I believe. And so at that point, I'm starting to imagine things that feel like I'm sort of riding a wave that's, I talked about this, I feel like in the Call to Adventure maybe, but I feel like I'm riding a wave that is a little bit too big for me, or I'm asking to do something that I don't really feel ultimately ready for, something like that. And it's funny because the keys to all of these like issues that I feel like I'm having in all of these different practices lie within the practices themselves, but I have to be willing to step further to get to the point of unlocking that piece of things. And what I feel like where I feel like I'm at now, it's not that any of these practices are not valid or not even working per se, but it's that I'm kind of getting a little bit stuck. I'm getting a little bit like I just oscillate between practices that make me feel okay about where I'm at, but I'm not really putting myself in the position to learn very much. That being said, I recognize though that I say that, but that's actually not the case now. I feel like I am only saying that because it's sort of a reflection on where I was at. I now can feel myself reading some new material, like slowly but surely exposing myself to new things, but also revising the things that have worked well for me. I think that's always been a method of how I do things. And I do really appreciate that. I like to build stable, strong foundations with things. But that being said, it also at times can be challenging for me to move out of the shallow waters because I feel so grounded in the shallow waters. And I'm like, okay, this is great. This feels good. But I can feel that within me that what I really desire is to go deep and to learn deeply and to feel the humility, the tenderness, the willingness, the openness, the expansiveness of seeing these open doors and being willing to step through them and walk through these doors. And yeah, I definitely feel like that's where I'm at. In some ways, I almost would want to name this episode "Walk Through the Door" or something like that. But I like "Let's Get Learnt." But yeah, and I that's where I'm at right now. Is I'm I'm allowing myself the chance to become a student and to reintegrate into the student mentality, into the beginner's mind mentality, into the wonder and the awe of what's possible. And I think it's a bit of a pitfall kind of thing of spiritual practices. And I've heard people talk about this before, and I can kind of feel it. It's like I've had some experiences that are, outside the bounds of what I thought I was going to be able to experience in my human life as Jack. And it's totally blown my mind several times. And they've been profound, incredible awakening experiences. But I feel like what's happened is I've started to fantasize over them in a way that is actually slowing down the process, because it's making me feel like I want to hang on to those just the same way that I hang on to any habit and get attached to any habit that at one time could be helpful, but eventually it keeps me stuck. Like, for example, like for me, running was a big thing like that a few years ago, maybe like 2-3 years ago. I was running 4 to 6 miles a day every single day because I felt like I can't skip a day. I need this habit. This is my key to whatever it was I thought I needed, self-love, accomplishment, sort of the body I wanted, the discipline I wanted, the focus I wanted, whatever it might be, all of those things. And I hung on to it so tightly that I got to a point where I was injuring myself because I was running too much and not stretching enough and not taking days off. And I got terrible runner's knee where I would, I'd have a long day at work, get home, have lots to do, and I wouldn't get to run until like, midnight or something like that. And I'd go out and I'd do the 4, 5, or 6 miles. And by the time I was like, a mile from home, I was having a hard time running. And once I was cooling down with a walk, I was limping. And then the next day at work, like walking to work and stuff, I was limping the whole way. And just giving myself the day at work to chill allowed my leg to heal just enough that I could run again that night and then do the whole thing over and limp again. And that was really slowing me down because I really wanted to run a half marathon and then a marathon, but I injured my knee too badly. There was no way I was going to be able to do, like 13, 13.1? Yeah, 13.1 miles. It's just, or a 10K. Like, I mean, a 10K, maybe at a time, but I got so attached to that practice, to that discipline. And it allowed me not to go as deeply as I really wanted to go, which going more deeply was, being able to do these races. And I just never got to do it. And not to say I'll never get to do it. I lost some interest in it, to be honest. I'm maybe at some point I'll go to running again. Now I just really appreciate walking and just the cardio of just exploring and being outside. And so it hasn't gone completely. I feel like that exploratory, adventurous inclination within me is still here. But it's here and present in a different way that feels more sustainable to me. But yeah, I feel like 4 to 6 miles a day is not necessarily shallow waters of running. Certainly not. But it is shallow in comparison to what I aspired to get to. I really wanted to move forward with running and get to a place where I was running really, really long distances. And there were like a handful of times I was able to do 10 miles at a time. But I mean, it was rough. I just wasn't taking care of myself in the way that I needed to in order to be able to go in deeply. And what that meant was learning more as I went. Just because I can run 6 miles at I don't remember I think my best was like a 7:30 pace or something. Just because I can do that and impress myself with that doesn't mean there isn't still more for me to learn, and that the learning process won't still be valuable. The learning process is always valuable. Always valuable. And I can feel that with spiritual practice, it's like I have these different modes, and I'm doing, the equivalent of running, like maybe 2 to 3 miles, but I'm doing it in ways that it's like as I start to get more deeply in each practice, I then, turn around and say, okay, that's as far as I wanted to get to with that one this time. So I'll go try this one for, a month, and then I'll do that, and then I'll come back to that. And I can just feel that oscillation, and it feels to me like it's time to do a deeper plunge and to use all of this discipline that I've been building, and just the sense of value in these practices and the value of spiritual practice in general to kind of fuel my launch, my deeper plunge, my, launching out to sea, my, we're in my space boat now, like going out there and really committing myself to this learning process, and understanding that the more I can open myself to learning, the more and closer and more deeply I will experience mastery. I think that they kind of go hand in hand, it feels like. And so in some senses, like maybe there's never a point of full mastery, but the more I can open myself to learn, the more I will master, Yeah. And so I just feel like that's where I'm at right now. And I like I said, I very much so encourage you to just open yourself to, even if you don't know what it is you want to learn about or learn to do, just open yourself to that, because I think it's an element of my life that I kind of let go by the wayside for a bit, because I felt like I had stuff that was working for me. And of any discipline that I could have, the discipline of continuous opening to learning is, it's like, that's the thing that I'm really working on right now at this point in my life, is opening myself to the learning process in a way where I don't have to just like, I feel like I've in the past been so like dragging my heels, to learn new things. And, maybe I don't know exactly where I'm at in that. If I'm not dragging my heels at all anymore, if I'm sprinting it through the door to learn, who knows? But all I know is that I'm opening myself to it, and that I'm ready to get experience, find what I truly want. It's time for that. It's time for you too to do that. It's time for all of us to do that. I mean, if the last year and a half has shown me anything, it's shown me that it's time to do what I really yearn for, and to experience what I want to experience, and to be what it is I want to be. How do I want to engage with this world? How do I want to engage with this human life that I found myself in? How do I want to engage with the universe, with God, with the spirit, with whatever it might be, however you want to put it? I think where I'm at is that I must open in order to do that. Because if I don't open, I can't see the doors that are open and ready for me to walk through. And it's time for that to happen. It's been time for that to happen, but no better time than now, Yeah. So I really see that as vital. Yeah. So, yeah, I think this is actually a good length of the podcast for this time. This feels right. This feels like that's kind of all that I wanted to talk about. I really appreciate you listening. I'm really grateful that like I have this outlet, and that there are some of you that are listening to this and have told me that it's beneficial to you. And yeah, I just want to encourage you to do what I'm doing. Like, let's do it together, you know? Let's practice this learning process together. Let's get learned. um, and yeah, I'm feeling grateful right now. I'm feeling a little scared right now, but I feel like it's that opening process that is so significant and so beautiful and filled with so much love if we can just open ourselves to that, you know, and see the amazing qualities that are waiting for us when we open ourselves to that, open ourselves to learning, open ourselves to the just this willingness to be what it is we really want to be and learn what we need to learn in order to get there. And it doesn't have to be super difficult. I mean, it can be, and in some ways that can be fun, but it doesn't have to be. Yeah. So I'm going to leave it at that. Let's get learnt this week. I'm going to reflect on this. I'm going to take some of the steps that I can feel that I've been sort of teetering around for the last probably 4 to 6 months, and maybe less, but probably at least that long actually. And I'm gonna report back because that's what this podcast is for. This is the story of our awakening, you know. So the story is the story. The story is whatever we want it to be. And right now, my story is about learning, and it's about plunging into a bit of uncertainty and being willing to take a bit of a leap and just walk through a door. And then, you know, who knows? Maybe I'll walk through that door and then I'll see, holy shit, there are tons of open doors here. That'd be nice. I think that's probably going to happen. All right. So, with that being said, I hope you have a wonderful week. I hope that you're experiencing love in your life in any and all the ways that it can form, that it lives, that it manifests within your experience. And I'll see you next week. All right. I love you. Here's to remembering who we are. Peace.